I stepped off the Greyhound with my legs still humming from the 12-hour ride, the gift bag crinkling softly in my hand. Inside were the tiny cotton onesies I'd folded the night before, and the blanket I'd stitched from pieces of my husband's old shirts. It still smelled faintly of lavender soap from my dresser drawer. I thought I'd hand it to my son with a smile, maybe even see his face light up the way it used to when he was little, and came home with scraped knees. When I reached the maternity ward, Logan was already there, standing just past the double doors. For a moment, just a breath, I imagined he'd hug me. Instead, he stayed rigid, like someone preparing to deliver bad news. The hallway buzzed with monitors and quiet footsteps, but his voice cut through everything. Valerie only wants family here. I blinked, certain I'd misheard him. But I am family. He didn't look angry. He looked practiced, like he had rehearsed this knowing it would land hard. Don't insist. She never liked you. The door behind him slid open for a pair of nurses, casting a stripe of bright white light across his shoulder. And then it closed again. That thin moment, the soft hiss of the door sealing shut, was all it took to erase the 12 hours I had spent imagining meeting my grandson for the first time. Logan didn't stay to see what I would do. He turned and disappeared into the ward, swallowed up by the soft lights and muted voices. I stood frozen, staring at the faint reflection of my own face in the glass. I tried to swallow the tightness rising in my throat, but it held steady, stubborn, refusing to move. A volunteer at the desk asked if I needed help. I shook my head, because what could she possibly do? The person I had come to see didn't want me there. The child I had raised didn't want me there. I walked out of the hospital slowly, the gift bag pressed against my side, and the blanket inside shifting with every step, as if reminding me it still existed, waiting for hands that might never reach for it. Outside, the air felt heavier than the sky, and I began the long walk back toward the station where the night bus would be waiting to take me home. The bus driver gave me a nod as I climbed the steps. But he didn't smile. I suppose I didn't either. I found a seat near the back, close to the window, and sat with the gift bag nestled on my lap, the blanket now carefully refolded, smoothed at the corners like something sacred. The smell of lavender reached me in waves each time the bus rocked too sharply. I had rubbed that oil in carefully, thinking it would be comforting for the baby. Soft, clean, safe. The bus was nearly empty. A young couple sat up front, both wearing headphones, leaning into each other's silence. An older man in a heavy jacket snored gently across the aisle. No one looked my way. Maybe that was a kindness. I didn't call Logan. I didn't text. What would I say that I'd traveled across 2 states just to be told I wasn't wanted? That I had stood outside a room where my grandson had entered the world and heard only the quiet sound of a door closing. I tried to reason with it as the desert rolled past the windows. Maybe it was Valerie's anxiety. Maybe she didn't want a room full of people. Maybe Logan had just panicked. That's what I told myself for the first hour. By hour 2, that story started to slip. The ache in my chest wasn't confusion. It wasn't disappointment. It was something older, heavier, something that knew it had been here before. I leaned my head against the window, the glass cool against my temple, and shut my eyes. For a while, I tried to imagine what the baby might look like. Maybe he had Logan's eyes. Maybe he didn't cry much. I had planned to stay the week. I'd booked a room, packed snacks for the waiting room, even brought a thermos of tea that was still warm in my tote. Now, I was headed back to a quiet house with nothing waiting but the unopened mail. 3 days later, my phone rang. The number had a California area code. The call came mid-morning, just as I was folding towels. I didn't recognize the number, but something in me paused before picking up. Maybe it was the way the numbers lined up too clean, too out of place. Mrs. Cordell, the woman said, cheerful, in that trained sort of way. Yes, I'm calling from St. Dunstan's billing department. We wanted to follow up. There's still an outstanding balance of $10,000 related to a delivery on March 2nd. You're listed as the guarantor. I stopped folding. One hand stayed wrapped around the edge of a towel, while the rest of me went still. I'm sorry, I said. She repeated it slower this time, like maybe I hadn't heard. But I had. Every word. I didn't agree to that, I said, not raising my voice. No one told me I was listed. Well, she replied politely. Firm, you were listed as the emergency contact and responsible party. That's what we have on file. I stared at the pattern on the kitchen wallpaper, little pale gold dots I'd stopped noticing years ago. I didn't say anything else. I didn't argue, just pressed the phone tighter to my ear until the silence stretched enough that she cleared her throat. Would you like me to email you the full invoice? No, I said quietly. I'll handle it. She thanked me and hung up. I stood there with the phone still in my hand. The call ended, but the words still ringing. Responsible party. That was the part that stung. Not a thank you. Not a call from Logan saying, Mom, we're in a bind, can you help? No message, no voice. Just a hospital administrator reading off a form. I set the towels down. The top one fell sideways and slid onto the floor. My stomach had that same hollow ache it did when I left the hospital, like I'd forgotten to eat even though I hadn't. That night, I unlocked the hallway closet for the first time in nearly a year. The closet smelled like old paint and dryer sheets. I had to move a few things, winter coats, a folded card table, a cracked storage bin that used to hold Christmas lights before I found the box. It sat right where I left it, tucked behind a pair of my husband's boots. I never had the heart to give away. The metal box was small, square, heavy in the hand. I brought it out and sat on the floor. The closet door half open behind me. My knees ached from the pressure, but I didn't adjust. I just sat there, holding the key. I hadn't opened that box since the year after Roger died. The check from the insurance company had come in the spring, right around the time the azaleas bloomed out front. Logan was still in college, still calling home every Sunday. Back then I kept the money in a separate account. Untouched. Protected. Meant for something more than groceries or car repairs. Something lasting. When Logan turned 25, I started drafting the paperwork, setting up the trust planning to give him everything once he hit 35 and had a family of his own. That milestone felt far off then, like I had all the time in the world to finish. Now the folder sat inside the box, still unsigned. The envelope with the original policy letter, the first bank statements, all still crisp. Even the ink on Roger's signature hadn't faded. I ran my fingers over the edge of the folder. I thought about the hospital call. I thought about the way Logan had stood in front of me at the maternity ward, not as a son, but as a gatekeeper. He didn't ask for help. He'd just assumed I would be there to pay. I set the folder aside and looked deeper into the box. There were a few coins loose at the bottom, bits of change I used to collect in jars around the house. I'd meant to roll them once. I didn't touch the money that day. But I didn't lock the box again either. The next morning, I walked into the bank. The teller at the bank didn't ask questions when I handed her the check. I had already made the withdrawal, already let the amount sit in my purse on the drive over. $10,000 printed in sharp black ink, drawn from a fund I never intended to touch, not for me, and certainly not like this. I handed it over with steady hands. Not because they deserved it, but because I wouldn't let my grandson's life start tethered to debt. He didn't choose his parents. He didn't choose the silence between us. I didn't linger. As soon as the receipt printed, I folded it neatly and slipped it into my wallet. Then I got back in the car and drove across town. The lawyer's office hadn't changed since I'd last been there. Same dusty blinds, same faint smell of legal pads and coffee. Marcia, the receptionist, gave me a quick smile and asked if I needed to schedule something. I said no. I had my paperwork already. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from a notary, flipping to the last page of the deed transfer form. Logan's name was listed right next to mine, just as it had been since Roger and I updated the file after his college graduation. I took the pen in my hand. I didn't feel angry. I felt clean. The line through his name wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. A single stroke, followed by the signature I'd practiced 1,000 times across envelopes and report cards and birthday cards that never got opened. I didn't leave a note, didn't call afterward. I left the building with the new deed tucked in my purse and my shoulders lighter than they'd been in weeks. Outside, the sky was flat and gray, and the air smelled faintly of rain. I stopped at the grocery store on the way home and bought myself tulips. Not because anyone would see them, but because I wanted color in the house that night. By the time I got home, the house was quiet again, and the mail was waiting by the door. I used to make excuses for him. That's the truth of it. Every time a call went unanswered, I told myself he must have been working late. When the holidays passed without a visit, I blamed the airline prices or weather delays. I sent cards anyway. Birthday anniversary, even those silly, just because ones I used to find near the checkout line. I'd write little notes inside, decorate them with stickers I knew he would roll his eyes at. Most never got a reply. One year, I sent a small package of scarf I'd knit while watching old detective shows. It came back 2 weeks later with a yellow sticker slapped across the top. Moved no forwarding address. I remember standing at the counter holding that box, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. I kept it in the hall closet for a year, like maybe he'd stop by, and I could hand it to him in person. He never did. It's strange how love can turn into something so quiet you don't even notice it's not being returned. You keep giving not because you expect anything, but because it's what you've always done. Then one day you look up and realize the table's been set for two, but you've been eating alone for years. I suppose I thought a baby would change things, that the birth of his own child might pull him back toward me like a tide correcting itself, but it didn't. If anything, it made the distance more visible. A hard line drawn across the years I'd kept pretending were just rough patches. That night, I pulled out the photo albums. Not to cry, just to see. Logan at 5 grinning with jelly on his chin. Logan in his prom tux half-tucked shirt and scuffed shoes. I stared at those pages for a long time. Then I closed the book and returned it to the shelf. The doorbell rang the next morning. A sound I hadn't expected not that early and not from them. The knock wasn't loud, but it was steady. I almost didn't answer. The sound came just after 7 in the morning, and I was still in my robe holding a cup of lukewarm tea. When I opened the door, Logan stood there with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Valerie hovered a few steps behind him, rocking a baby wrapped in a gray blanket. His little fists were balled up tight near his face, and his cries were sharp and tired. Logan didn't smile. "We lost the apartment," he said. "It's temporary. We just need a few days to get things sorted." He didn't say my name, didn't say Mom. I didn't answer right away. I just moved to the side and let the door open wider. They stepped in without hesitation, as if the place had been waiting for them. Valerie looked around the living room like she was cataloging what had changed. Logan dropped the bag by the hallway and took the baby from her arms without a word. I didn't offer food. I didn't ask what happened. I didn't say it was okay. I just turned and walked down the hall to my bedroom, shut the door behind me and locked it. Then I lay down and pulled the blanket up to my shoulders. It had been months since I'd shared a roof with anyone. The silence in this house had become its own kind of company, one that didn't raise its voice or leave dishes in the sink. Now it was broken by soft footsteps, creaking floorboards, the sound of a baby's cries bouncing off old walls. I closed my eyes and let it all move around me, untouched. No one knocked on my door that night. No one said thank you. The next morning I brewed coffee before sunrise and taped a single sheet of paper to the refrigerator. I woke early before the baby stirred. The kitchen was still dark and the coffee pot sounded louder than usual in the quiet. I set out a single mug, printed the list from my computer, and taped it to the refrigerator with 2 strips of masking tape. It wasn't punishment. It was clarity. By the time Valerie came in, I was sitting at the table flipping through the grocery circulars. Her hair was tied back in a loose knot, and her expression was somewhere between sleepy and annoyed. She opened the fridge, saw the paper, and paused. I didn't look up. "Wait," she said, blinking at the list. "We're paying to stay here." I kept turning pages. Her voice sharpened. "You're charging us rent." I stood, walked to the hutch, and opened the drawer where I kept my important documents. From inside, I pulled a single sheet, the updated house deed. I placed it on the table beside her without a word. Valerie glanced down at it. Her eyes scanned the names. Her own wasn't there. Logan's wasn't either. Instead, printed in clean black font beneath mine, was the name of my niece, Elise Cordell. She's 28, works as a wildlife researcher in Flagstaff. Calls every Sunday. Sent me a birthday card last year with a pressed flower tucked inside. Valerie didn't say anything for a while. She poured herself a cup of coffee, sat across from me, and stared at the list like it might change if she waited long enough. The rules were simple: $800 rent. Utilities split evenly. Grocery rotation by week. Chores not listed, but expected. I sipped my coffee slowly. My hands didn't shake. She finally spoke again. "You really want it this way?" I folded the deed and returned it to the drawer. "It already is." That afternoon, Logan came home with takeout containers and didn't mention the paper on the fridge. He ate quietly, then offered to do the dishes. That night, I heard them whispering in the guest room, voices tight and hushed. I didn't lean in to listen. I had laundry to fold. I settled into a rhythm that didn't require anyone else's permission. I didn't ask to hold the baby, though I heard him fussing in the mornings and late at night. I washed the bottles, lined them up on a towel to dry, and folded whatever laundry appeared in the basket outside the guest room door. I didn't hover. I didn't offer advice. I let the house keep its quiet shape around all of us. Some evenings, I'd sit on the porch with a book, though I rarely turned the pages. I just liked the air and the stillness. Inside, I could hear Valerie humming to the baby, or Logan pacing with him pressed to his shoulder. Their lives ran parallel to mine, close enough to hear, but not close enough to touch. One afternoon, I was trimming the dead leaves off a houseplant when Logan appeared in the doorway with the stroller. He hesitated, like he wasn't sure if he should interrupt. "Mom," he said, "we're going to take a walk. Do you want to come?" I didn't turn immediately. I finished pulling the wilted leaf, tossed it into the trash, and wiped my hands on a dish towel. "No," I said. "You two go ahead." He stayed where he was. "Is this about the hospital?" he asked. I finally looked at him. His face was tired, softer than I remembered, but the question felt too small for the weight it carried. "It's about every time I wasn't enough," I said. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The baby fussed in the stroller, and Logan reached down to calm him, grateful for something to do with his hands. "I didn't know it felt like that," he said. Quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't trust what might come out if I did. After a moment, he nodded and pushed the stroller toward the front door. I listened as it squeaked down the walkway, the sound fading until it disappeared into the neighborhood. When the house grew still again, I took the folded laundry to the guest room and set it on the chair. 2 weeks later, they packed their things before sunrise. I heard the front door click shut just after 5 in the morning. No note. No goodbye. Just the quiet scrape of suitcase wheels across the porch and a car engine turning over. I didn't get up. I waited until the sound was gone, until the silence had settled into the walls again. Then I made coffee. It wasn't until late afternoon that I walked down the hallway to the room that was supposed to be the nursery. I hadn't been in there much since they arrived. I'd left it untouched, a space I once imagined painting soft yellow, with a rocker near the window and a bookshelf shaped like a tree. Instead, it had become a place to store things that had nowhere else to go. An extra lamp, a few unopened boxes, the basket of blankets I kept tucked beneath the window bench. I sat down on the edge of the bed and reached for the blanket. The cotton had softened since I first folded it, like even fabric could age from waiting too long. I held it in my lap for a while, smoothing the corners, tracing the stitches I'd sewn by hand. There was no photograph, no moment to remember, just the thread and the time it took to make something meant for arms that never opened to receive it. I rose and folded it one last time, this time tighter, neater. Then I placed it on the shelf in the corner of the room beside a box of picture frames I hadn't filled. I opened the windows wide, and the late sun poured in, warm and slow. The curtains fluttered a little like breath returning to a quiet room. The air smelled clean again, not of laundry or formula or someone else's presence, but of dust, lemon oil, and the quiet that belongs to your own home. I didn't cry. Not this time. I made the bed. I swept the floor. I opened my closet and pulled out the small suitcase I hadn't used since last fall. The train to Flagstaff left in the morning.